The Graphic Histories Podcast.
I got bit by a radioactive bug. I tried an experimental drug. Went up for a stroll on a gamma testing range. I found an enchanted hurricane. I made a serum that made me small. I modified the serum so it would make me tall. Radioactive isotope in my eyes. Dying alien helped me accessorize. I gained the proportion and strength of a spider. Now I'm invincible and I can fly. I lost my sight, my other senses were heightened. I'm gonna put on my pajamas and go fight crime.
Hey there and welcome to the Graphic Histories Podcast. My name is André, your podcast host. Big thanks to Uka the Mock for our theme song, Superpowers. And big thanks to you, gentle listener, for tuning in once again to another action-packed, fun-filled, explosive show. Today we talk with Chris Michael, who is a recent comic book writer and artist and works on the comic book Crit, which is a very cool idea. He basically takes D&D kind of vibed sessions centered around modern day superhero stuff and uses what comes out of those sessions to write this comic book and draw it. And it's really cool. It's a really cool idea. It's a novel, unique way to make books and something I hadn't encountered before. So we had a great little conversation. It gets pretty deep. I mean, the guy has a long history and some traumatic stuff in his past, and we get into that. And it's a great, cool conversation. I mean, it's not often we get to talk about some deeper issues like that with some people. I mean, some people are more guarded than others. But Chris was an open book, and I was super excited to chat with him. We had a great discussion. So tune into that. And, often when I chat with people, you don't expect it. You don't know what to expect. Who knows what they're going to bring up? Who knows what's going to come out of the conversation? Who knows how deep you're going to go about whatever issues they have or their process or anything like that? Some people are far more open than others. And, Chris was a wide open book, and he was excited to talk about his book, but we got deep into his life and the choices he made that led him to working on the book and his problems in the past with anger and where he's come with that. And, yeah, it's a good one. It's a really good, deep conversation, that kind of centers around mental health and other things like that. That's important. Stuff we need to talk about, stuff we need to discuss. In the real world, I just recently saw Deadpool and Wolverine. As we do talk about in this podcast a little bit as it comes up. We don't really give any spoilers or anything. But, it was a fun time. On our other podcast, X-Rated, the X-Men Animated Review Show, we did the review for it as well, which is full of spoilers, so don't listen to that if you haven't seen it yet. But after you do, go listen. And I believe David Cutler dropped in as a guest and said... he thinks his parents would have a better job figuring out cold fusion than they would the plot of that movie because they don't know anything about comics. They haven't watched every Marvel thing. But my wife has it, and she watched it, and she really enjoyed it as well. So, there's an enjoyment for all, but it's certainly full of fan service, full of fan service. But I was happy about it. I was there for every little bit of it, and it was an enjoyable ride, and certainly a tribute to the Fox films and what's come before. I believe I called it my letterbox review, the Isle of Misfit Toys of old Marvel properties and films, and they really delved deep into it, and it was a fun ride. I watch a lot of heady movies, a lot of artistic, serious films, and that's not a brag or anything. It's just the type of stuff I tend to watch. I also watch a lot of schlocky old horror movies, which I also love, but sometimes you just want to go watch something that's really, really fun, and this certainly was that. It was a ton of fun. And I had a blast watching it, and I think you probably will too. If you're into comics, if you like what's come before, you like the Marvel Universe proper, see MCU as it is, and it's a blast. Fun movie, really fun movie. And as I mentioned, Chris and I do chat about it. So why don't you just listen to us chat about it a little bit, and then get into some other stuff. A little longer episode than usual, but I don't really cut stuff. Sometimes I edit just to fix any sound issues, but I don't really cut anything we talk about. I try to keep it fun, full conversation, so you get all of it. And that's what we do here. So hopefully you enjoy my chat with Chris Michael. Awesome. Yeah, the Gremlins they're like replicas of the puppets from the movie. They're like NECA put them out a few years ago.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. I got the kind of the flasher one there. There's also one behind my computer that's like a model kit one. That's like
Oh, wow.
which I really like that one. And there's a few Mogwais back there. I don't know if you can see them. Kind of One of
Yep.
the Stripe and one of just Gizmo.
That's a show or a movie I hope they don't redo. Like,
I'm quite
don't,
surprised they haven't yet. Although there is like a cartoon show I want on Prime or
yeah,
something. I haven't watched it yet.
I saw it. It's not bad. It's definitely like geared towards kids.
Hmm.
But if they're gonna redo it, they need to redo the whole thing, not like they need to redo it authentically, like not change anything, just update it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I remember like I'm a big fan of Joe Dante, and I listen to a podcast he does called The Best Movies. No, the movies that made me. And he often like it comes up every once in a while where it's, people go on and talk about their favorite movies or their top 10 needle drops in a movie or top 10 action sequences or top 10 comedies or something. Usually like celebrities, but people often bring up that Gremlins is in their list when they're talking to him. And he's talked about it a bit. He said that like he wishes because like working with puppets back then was so difficult, like with you have to build floors underneath
Yeah.
like for the
Oh,
puppeteers to hide
robotics.
in and all that stuff. And he said like he would love to see if they were going to do another one, he wouldn't want to see them do CGI. He'd want to see them do puppets, but now you can use CGI to make it easier for the puppeteers by removing them from the shots and stuff like that. So it would be much easier in that regard to kind of keep it going. It's one thing I'm with the way they were going nuts with all the nostalgia stuff now. I'm really surprised it hasn't, been done.
Well, they did Dark Crystal, and they did that
Hmm.
phenomenal.
Yeah. I think
So they kept it like that, I'd be okay.
yeah,
Uh,
that's what I would want to see too. I mean, that was such a great way to do it. I would very much like to if they're going to return to it, I'd like to see Joe Dante do it and like to see, them do that. I mean, Phoebe Cates is kind of retired. And I don't know what the guy that played Billy's doing, but I'm sure they'd come out maybe, I'm sure he'd drive a dump truck full of money up to their house or they wouldn't say no. But
you would think. You would think. I, I just I don't like um the attack on our nostalgia.
yeah. What do you mean like the how they keep rolling things back out?
They do it, but they don't do it with the same passion.
No, it does feel like a money grab more times than not, for sure. And I mean, there are things that come out that are very much geared that way, like X-Men 97, for instance, that like obviously a lot of care was paid to the original show, but also kind of making it accessible to adults and not just a kid show anymore, because that's the market they're aimed at. So stuff like that, it really does seem that way. I haven't seen the new Ghostbusters movie, but like I didn't mind the last one. Uh,
I've seen both of them,
mhm.
and they're not without flaws, but we have to remember when we were kids, He-Man, Thundercats, all the stuff that we grew up on wasn't geared toward our parents, it was geared towards us,
Mhm.
and our our parents probably thought it was stupid.
Rightfully
But
so.
it doesn't, and right, I mean, it doesn't mean that what we enjoyed was stupid to our generation. It was great,
Mm.
and if you replay it now, it some of it holds up.
Oh
Uh,
God, He-Man certainly doesn't. I tried to rewatch that once and I was like, oh God, it's like 10 minutes of the same fight sequence of them just circling
it's
each other over and over again.
it is bad. It is very bad.
But like the Kevin Smith series on Netflix, I really liked. Like it was very much
Really?
geared for adults. I mean, I liked it all right. I mean,
Yeah.
it was certainly better than watching the old series again, that's for sure.
Yeah, I could not get into it.
Really?
If I'm real, I even my kid didn't like it.
Really?
Uh, yeah, she was because we watched some of the original and she was like, the graphics on those are bad. And so I showed her the new one. And I'll be fair, my daughter is very much not a fan of the girl boss leads
Hmm.
at all.
Really?
She's a 14-year-old girl and she's like, this isn't He-Man. Who is that girl? Like, why aren't we getting He-Man? And that kind of let her. And I'm not going to go into the whole thing. I didn't like, and this is any TV show that does it. I don't like when your female character or any character is blasting the hero, you kept this from me, your secret identity. It's a fucking secret.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of bugged me, and like the angst towards He-Man. It would be one thing if it was just like a small like, hey, that really sucked, but I was a trustworthy person. But then move on. Like I still, I'm still loyal to him. He all this time he was still like my dude. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I wouldn't have minded if it was like a small thing, but it was such a big portion of that first season that it turned me off to the rest of the season.
Yeah, I find that sometimes it's like this manufactured, obviously then like stories are built on conflict and not always just straight up fighting, but sometimes it's emotional conflict or it's like I always joke that the enemy of happiness is the sequel. Like the first movie ends and the guy and the girl end up together and it's always very great and you're happy. And then they make the sequel and then they have to either usually the guy and the girl had some kind of a fight between 1 and 2 and they're not really together anymore. And then by the end of 2, they're back together and then that's great. But then by the third one, usually the girl's completely gone and there's a new girl. We just don't even talk about that first girl. So, it's just sort of how it always goes. And I feel like not every movie needs to have like a romantic conflict. Like I watched the new Deadpool movie,
Right.
and I don't want to reveal too much. I really liked
Oh,
it.
I saw it. I saw it opening night. So you're
I don't
fine.
want to reveal too much to anyone who hasn't seen it because it is still fairly new. But I don't think the conflict between him and Vanessa was really necessary. It seemed very threadbare and kind of manufactured just to give him a little more, angst in his sort of mission. I don't know if it was really necessary, especially after like the first 2 movies established how she was like ride or die, no matter what, I'm with you. And then,
I will agree with you on that one.
yeah. But if it's a minor complaint, I like the movie a lot.
Yeah.
All said and done, I really
Deadpool-
like it. And talking about fan service, like that movie is like 90% fan service, but I love it. Like even the little, all the little nods, all the little comic stuff, I thought it was all really good. I was certainly here for it.
Yeah, I like it's just a fan service movie,
Yeah, but
And
there's nothing wrong with
again, I
that.
won't go into any of it to give any of it away.
No.
Uh,
But all the
but
things the fans from the comics wanted to see in X-Men movies and never got to see, they kind of gave you. A lot of it anyway. Like here's this version of this character, here's this storyline kind of scene, here's the only briefly, but you get a glimpse of it. And I think that a lot of people were happy with that. So, and I certainly was. It was cool. I mean, it was a nice little, I guess, end cap to the X-Men universe. I guess that's what it was supposed to be. Based on the emotional little music video they put in the credits, I would say so. But it was cool. I really dug it.
yeah, I'm with you. I
Yeah.
really enjoyed it. I'm not too critical on stuff like Deadpool
Mm.
because you kind of like walk into it knowing what you're gonna get. I saw some meme. It was like we walked out because it was blasphemous to God, and I'm like, I won't talk religion.
Yeah,
I
sure.
have. I'm a religious person.
Yeah, fine.
But you don't go see Deadpool expecting it to fit in with your religious beliefs.
Did they
You know,
not watch the first 2? Like, how would they think this would
I
be any
don't know. I
different?
think it's clickbait.
Yeah, maybe
A
so.
lot of,
Probably so.
like you said, a lot of manufactured conflict, and we
Mm,
have a lot of that in life too. Uh,
100%.
and that was my issue with the Flash, the "We Are Flash" thing.
Mm,
Really, because I liked the Flash series the first couple of seasons, and then as his team started becoming more important or more prominent in some of the episodes than he was. It's one thing like every few episodes because I think they ran like 22 a season
mhm.
or
Yeah, they were
something.
long seasons.
Right. It's okay to break it up and have an episode that focuses on somebody else, but you don't watch The Flash to watch Iris.
Mhm.
You know, like that bugged me, especially towards the end. I know a lot of the fan base dropped off because of the "We Are Flash," "I Am Flash" thing, and it's like, no, you're not. You're Iris. And why does every
We
single person in this universe have superpowers? Like
Well, I
there's
think that's
different
the problem
ways.
with those sort of shows because they go for so long. Like 20, they got to fill 22 episodes of a season and you try to keep it exciting. Like I checked out of the CW universe probably, I don't know, around like I don't know, season 3 or 4 of The Flash and then like season 7, I guess, of Arrow. I don't know. It was like for a while and I was digging it all right, but I just like it got to a point where it felt like a chore to watch it. And I was just like, I can't watch it any. And I don't give up on shows. I usually stick it out to the end. I watch all of the Blacklist for some reason. And that show really fell apart. But I don't know. Like I just it wasn't, but I get what you're saying. I feel like, and probably a lot of it has to do when you have to film 22 episodes, that's like a huge chunk of a year of filming. And I'm sure some of the actors are like, I got to go on vacation or do something or have something else happen. And that's probably why they fill in with those sort of episodes. But it did seem like they were getting a lot of those eventually.
Yeah, I I won't even go into all that stuff too much, but
It's all good.
you know, there's been a lot of that. I think that's one of the reasons why Deadpool is doing so well is it's uh it's the closest thing we're gonna get to that nostalgic '90s film style.
Mhm.
I think, you know, a buddy of mine was like, what would you say it reminded you of?" And I was like, honestly, if I had to say anything, like just the core storyline, it made me feel like when I watched Demolition Man, and he was like, "That's so weird," and I'm like, "But in Demolition Man, really, they're buddies. They just don't know it. You know, they're
Mhm.
opposite ends. Like those two would probably in real life hash it out, go have a beer afterward." Um, like I watch a lot of White Collar, and like the bad guy always becomes friends with the guy that catches him.
Mhm.
You know, it's like,
Right.
oh, well, you caught me. And then it's like intriguing because their minds obviously work similar for them to be able to outwit each other all the time. And that's what Wolverine and Deadpool reminded me of was like a cool, like buddy cop flick, you know, like the other guys.
Tango and
For
Cash or one of those sort of things.
right. Like it was
Yeah.
just fun to be fun. And I think that's one thing we've been lacking in a lot of media lately is just fun for the sake of being fun. I don't need, drama. I don't need um and I say this a lot, like what I need is escapism.
Mhm. I'm
Um,
appreciating that mindset more the older I get, mostly because it's like, there are times, like I'm a big movie guy. I watch a lot of movies. I love artsy Criterion Channel movies. I watch tons of those. But every once in a while, it's like, I'd like to watch 80s schlocky horror movies a lot. Like, and it's not, they're on two different worlds, but sometimes you approach movies to get something different from them. Everything doesn't need to be a super trauma dump, thing. And that's why that aspect of Deadpool was the 3 was the part where I was like, I don't think we needed that. It was kind of fun just being fun. Like him fighting for his universe should be enough motivation, you know? Like, but
I
you're
agree.
right. Yeah,
I think it was just their way of bringing her in somehow and making her relevant because she wasn't very relevant in the second movie.
she was less in this one, I found. Like it was just literally a flashback scene and then a party scene. It was barely any appearance.
I felt like in this, I have to I'm actually going back and rewatching them now, but I felt like
Mhm.
in the second one, she wasn't even in it.
Not very well, a lot of flashbacks because she was killed at the beginning, near the beginning.
That's
And then
right.
a lot of it was like him seeing her. He would try to die to be with her, and he would kind of see her on the other side, but he'd keep coming back to life because he'd regenerate. Um, and then, of course, he uses time travel to fix it all later. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, so I know what you're saying, and and also like I'm also trying to be very much of the if it's not for me, it's fine. Like I find nerd culture is so like crazily toxic with people that are just so upset that the thing isn't what they want it to be, and therefore no one should enjoy it. It should be ruined. They take pleasure out of the movies that do horribly. They're like, see this one, Marvel did this and it didn't make as much money. Yeah, like it's a victory for them, even though they have zero skin in the game. It's like if it's not for you, just don't watch it. You look at it and say, this isn't for me. Try not to ruin it for someone else. If someone else enjoys it, why not? Let it exist.
The only thing that bugs me when something doesn't do well is the blame game.
Hmm. Oh yeah, that's 100% it.
You
Especially
know,
like the Star Wars community is crazy with that stuff.
well, all of nerddom is
Yes.
about that. For instance, I'll use Ms. Marvel as like what you were saying.
Hmm.
When that was, I thought Disney failed, but not, or Marvel failed on that, but not because of the character, but because of their marketing. You don't market Ms. Marvel to 30 to 50-year-old men.
Hmm.
You market Ms. Marvel to tweens and under.
Hmm.
That's something I would have come home off the bus when I was in middle school and been like, oh, like, because I watched Saved by the Bell,
Yeah.
and I think they kind of failed on the marketing aspect of it. That was my take was it's not for me, it's for a younger generation. Marvel just didn't market it right for us to know, oh, this isn't for that 40-year-old that comes home from work and wants to unwind with Marvel shows. This is for that 15-year-old kid that comes home and wants to unwind with Marvel shows.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I think
that's
that is okay. That is perfect. Okay.
yeah, I agree, 100%. And it's like, yeah, like people realize it's not for you. That's it. But I know what you're saying. They do. They're trying. Well, I mean, the part of it is they're trying to build this cohesive universe, and they're also trying to appeal to a bunch of different demographics at the same time, which is fine. But you should have different imprints for kids. Whatever.
Mhm.
I liked Ms. Marvel okay, or the Marvels okay. I wouldn't say it was one of my favorite ones, but it was there. But I just find it's funny because like everyone just gets so upset, and it's also this idea that like the new thing is a sub superseding the old thing. Like if you love the old thing, just go watch the old thing. No one's taking it from you. It's I used to joke about the when they made the female Ghostbusters movie. Not that I loved it, but it was meh. But when they were making it, everybody was losing their mind about it. I was like, it's not like Melissa McCarthy's going to kick in your door and punch you in the nuts and take your copy of Ghostbusters. Like it's still there. Go watch it. Just don't go watch the new one. It's not for you. So, but
The
yeah,
some of the issues that well, not we, but that people run into, especially the creators, is when they also manufacture drama with the fans
yeah,
just to
yeah.
drum up um, interest in it.
Mhm.
Because any press is good press, right? So when you make some crybabies, which people are,
Mhm.
you know, and I'll admit, like there are things that have happened within some of the movies that I've really wanted to see, me shut it off.
Mhm.
Um, for instance, I grew up on Star Wars,
Mhm.
and I had a very hard childhood.
Mhm.
Star Wars was the only thing that I had as a kid. My mom played Star Wars figures with me. I had like every book that came out. Um,
Nice.
and the point is, Star Wars means more to me than just some sci-fi adventure. There's a lot of memories with the franchise.
Mhm.
And when the first one came out, seven, I was like, okay, they're playing it safe. It is what it is. And then the next one came out, and I didn't like the art. Can you hear me now? Scene. It really turned me off. When he flies up, when Poe flies up, and he's like trying to talk to him, and he's like, "I can't hear you. I can't hear you." He's like, "Can you hear me now?" And I'm like, "That. Come on. This guy's a general. Like, he's a very smart person, and
Mhm.
this is what we get, like a Verizon commercial."
Mhm.
That said to me, okay, so they found out that Guardians of the Galaxy worked, so they're gonna rip off Guardians.
Yeah, I
It
think we're getting a
irritated
lot of
me,
that
but I
now.
was like, whatever, I'll go forward with it. It was the scene with Leia. When she flies out of that ship, there was a piece of me as a kid that was like, I was introduced to this character in space, and she's dead in real life. So the way they kill her in this, which made total sense, was for her to fly off into space and turn into space dust.
Mhm.
And I was like, that's beautiful, dude. I had tears in my eyes a little bit when she was like flying out
That
there.
was a wild choice. Yeah, I agree.
And when they brought her back in, I almost walked out of the whole film.
Yeah.
I said I can't do it. I said that right there just it like brought me to this point where I was like, they can do no more wrong in this movie. I don't care where the movie goes. That was beautiful. And then they pull her back in, and I said, I'm done. Like
Mm.
I can't go on. And then
Especially how like weird she was in the other like carrying on because it was like just used other cuts from that they'd done before. So like her appearances are rather disjointed. It would have made more sense that way, but I don't know if they wanted to, you know, I guess since she died in real life, maybe it was tragic to kill her off that way in the series. But then I don't know. But you're right, it was a weird decision. But
and
and
that's my choice. Like I don't
yeah, I mean, hey, you
don't
got the
sit here and
prerogative.
like I talked to my friends about it, and that it took me a little while because again, Star Wars is a big thing for me. I've seen
Mm,
everything. I haven't seen Acolyte. I've watched enough of the clips to know I'm not going to have to watch that one.
mm,
Um, I didn't watch season 3 of Mandalorian, not
yeah.
because I didn't want to. I skipped it after everything came out about it, but at the time I just didn't have time to watch it.
Mm.
And then I watched the synopsis, and I was like, well, I don't have to watch that, I guess.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm not done it, but I'm getting through it. It's all right. Like I dig it. I like
to
Star Wars,
me,
so
the older I get, time is more
Mm.
important than money to me.
Yes, agreed.
You know, and I have a 15 or a 14-year-old, and like time is something you can't get back.
Hmm.
If I spend 15, $20 to see a movie, I can get that 15 to $20 back somehow.
Hmm.
But that 2 hours that I just wasted that could have been doing something like drawing my comic book, I'll never get that back.
Hmm.
Um, you know, I've talked a little bit about this. I've actually been pronounced dead 3 times in my life, and in 2015, I came to a point where they gave me 3 days to live. And like I actually signed like DNRs, sat with a priest, did like all the final things. I was just waiting to die, and it when I got out of it, it changed my perspective on a lot of things. And it took me, and then my mom died, but my mom's dying wish was for me to stop being so angry at nothing. Um, and so it took a long time for me to listen to that one, but I finally got there. And a lot of what I went through in that time period between, me almost passing and my mom actually passing, it clicks that, our time here is so very limited. For
Mm.
one, I don't want to waste time on things that don't matter. If it's not going to matter, I don't want to waste my time on.
Hmm.
Don't want to get angry over things that don't matter. And some of the stuff I see people getting mad at, I chime in. The best one was the Force Whip. Again, I know a lot about Star Wars.
Hmm.
And the Force Whip, while yes, it's been in canon somewhere, they've now, since Disney's put it there, the original one, the one people keep quoting from the comic book is actually an electric whip,
Hmm.
and it has metal in it, which conducts electricity, so it makes sense. But a plasma-based whip does not make any logical sense
Hmm.
at all scientifically. And that's the one thing I liked about Star Wars. It had some hard sci-fi,
Hmm.
but it played loosely with it. Whereas Star Trek, when those two were competing, Star Trek was like super hard sci-fi.
Oh yeah, yeah. Everything had
And
every reasonable explanation.
right, like that show did so well for those fans because it stuck to its hard sci-fi. Star Wars was like, hey, we're very loose sci-fi, but we operate within this realm of things.
Mm.
Even the books, when they started to get outlandish, and not all of them needed to be saved, but I do think there was quite a few series in that extended universe that they should have made canon.
Yeah,
Um,
that was kind of a sad day when they announced that. I mean, I knew it was probably coming, but it was still like, yeah, there's a lot of stuff I read. I mean, I guess you can still read the books and enjoy them, but you know,
You can't. The part that made me salty was there was an interview and they said, "Oh, but we have no reference like we do Marvel," and I was like, "Are you kidding me? You're picking and choosing what reference you want to use. Come on,
yeah.
don't even start." You have that was the joy of Star Wars was it was like a big sandbox for everyone to play in.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
but the Force Whip make I got into that conversation with someone and I just hey like I'm not flaming the fan war over here,
Yeah.
but here's a scientific breakdown of how this doesn't work. It just does not work. And
Yeah.
actually, lightsaber operates this way. You can't have a lightsaber whip. Like it just
Mm.
doesn't work. And I said, I'm not joining your fight. I don't care. At the end of the day, I don't care because like I made peace with Star Wars a long time ago. I have my movies,
Yep.
and then I have a few shows that I really enjoy. Andor is really good, but again, it doesn't have Jedi in it, so that's why it's good. I think I think Disney does very well when they don't have Jedi in their movie.
Mm.
Um, Andor was good. Honestly, I'm probably one of the few people that didn't hate Solo. I didn't see the point in it.
I liked it a lot, actually. I thought it was a
I
fun
thought it was
space
a good
western.
heist
Yeah,
film.
it's a fun space western. That's
Yeah,
all I
like
wanted.
it was it was unneeded. There were some lines in there, like the last name Solo piece. Like
Mm.
we didn't need that. We didn't need there was what they thought was fan service was really stupid.
Mm. Yeah, it's
But the
not quite.
rest of the film was fine.
Mhm.
And then we got Darth Maul, and I'm sorry if I spoiled anything. That's on you.
Oh God, that's been a
Uh,
long time. I think that one's safe. It's been a long time, but now
but
we'll probably never get closure on it because
yeah, and that sucks. But hey, maybe they'll have a comic or a book come out that
Well, I
we
know
can
they've
read.
talked about doing a Lando show because I know Donald Glover's version of Lando was fairly well received. So who
But
knows?
do we need it? We don't.
No, no, we don't need it. But who needs anything? Cool. Well, I want to get onto the you dying and stuff, or but maybe we should start further back.
Oh
So,
yeah, yeah. Sorry, I can talk Star
no, I could
Wars.
easily all day, as well. So you weren't talking about anything I wouldn't happily talk about. But so are you from where you at? Where are you from originally?
Originally, I'm from Connecticut. I
Okay.
live in North Carolina now. I moved here in 2004.
Hmm.
So August 8th of this year will be exactly 20 years I've been down here.
Wow.
Um, and I moved down here because I wanted to start a band. And
Really?
yep, and I did. And I did that for about 6 years. I played professionally, and we got a subsidiary of Sony Records. I played like Warp Tour and stuff.
Hmm.
Um, and then in 20 or about 2010, I went back to school and started working. And then, you know, now now I make comic books based on Dungeons and Dragons.
Which is cool. Well, you mentioned you had a hard childhood. Like, can you elaborate on that? Was it like, um,
Well, I was an only child till I was 6, and then by the time I was 12, I was one of 11 kids.
oh my
And
God.
uh, I went through 3 first grades, 2 second grades, 4 third grades, moved quite a bit. Um,
Was it a military situation or is it just a lot of,
no, my mom hated my dad, and my dad kept moving closer to where we were, so my mom would move away.
I see.
And this is back in the day when, there's no social media and
Hmm.
ways to track people. He had to find us through friends and family that would know where my mom was.
Wow.
Uh, oh, my mom got remarried, and then
Was you wherever, like, do you remember your parents being together or was that,
oh yeah, I have a ridiculously good memory.
oh,
Um, yes, as far back as like 2 and 3 years old, I can remember stuff.
wow.
Uh, yeah, so yeah, just everybody has their childhood trauma, and I have enough to get turned down by 3 therapists and told I need to find someone with more experience.
Oh,
So,
wow.
um, you know, but I'm 40 now
Uh-huh.
and worked through quite a bit of it, and it's something, there's things that people ask you, like, if you could change anything, would you? And there's parts of me that's like, yeah, I wish I never went through this.
Hmm.
And then there's other parts of me that are like, but I wouldn't be where I'm at if it didn't happen.
Mm.
So I have to take the good with the bad. And, some days are harder than others. I'm going through a divorce right now.
Yeah.
I married my best friend of 11 years. You'd think that, we would survive. And after 8 years, we didn't, sadly.
Mm.
And so turning over a new leaf, luckily, we're still really good friends. So we had a really good foundation to begin with, and we to carry on the friendship. And we've been honestly, it's been like I talk about what we're doing in the divorce, and people are how how do you guys sit in the same room and hang out? My daughter, she's not experiencing anything that I went through when my parents got divorced.
Mm.
Um, we've uh, we're co-parenting very, very well, and so yeah, we all go through our own stuff, and I think at the end of the day, it's what molds us into who we are. And um, one of my brothers went through some terrible, terrible stuff too. And I asked him one day how he coped with it, and he said, "Well, I have 2 options. I can let it define me, or I can move past it." And he's like, "I have 5 kids. I can't let my trauma from when I was 8 define me and make me a bad dad, or else they're going to have their own trauma, you
Mm.
know." And yeah, it's stuff that's the kind of stuff that sits with me is when you like talk to someone who you think like, wow, how could they do that? And they give you just like the most simple answer, you know. Um, I actually asked him permission to get over thing that really bugged me that happened with him.
Mm.
And I called him and I said, hey, I'm working on some stuff, and I was told to move on past this, and I don't want to do that without asking your permission first because it happened to you. And he was like, I got over that a long time ago. He
Mm.
was like, you need to give that up. And I asked him how, because clearly he was a lot stronger in that than I was. And we talked, and afterward I was like, oh wow, like thank you. Freeing myself of this anger and emotion is very good. And he was like, I can't believe you waited like 20 years to talk to me about this.
You listen to people talk about their struggles or their traumas. I feel like I've had a fairly good childhood life. In that regard, I don't have a lot of baggage in that regard. But everybody's got their own, some more than others. And yeah, I mean that's kind of, you don't want to think it's as simple as X as it's not, but you're right, and you can't, like, people tell you to choose to let things go, and it's not that easy for a lot of folks. But the fact that you have a decent system, like, it sounds like you're carrying a lot of anger through all that. So it's nice to get some relief, or at least some uh abolition, I guess, from somebody, right? As far as that goes.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Like when I thought about giving up anger and like, what's that going to do for me?
Mm.
You know, what does that actually do at the end of the day? How does that even change anything? I'm just not mad.
Mm-hmm.
But that stuff, in my head, I'm like, but that stuff still happened. Those people are still there, out there, doing their thing. And when I finally got past a few things, I think back at it and I'm like, man, I was so angry for so long. Like things would just set me off
Mm-hmm.
all the time. And now, like, I live a bit of a more peaceful life. Um, like I said, right now I'm going through this stuff, which was unexpected and kind of out of left field.
Yeah, but it
But
sounds like you've grown enough to not, if you can even say what you're saying now, that indicates that you're self-aware enough to know that, you had issues with anger, and that,
actually,
like, even most people that are like really lost in just angry people that blame everybody for their problems and never take any responsibility for their own actions or their own anger. They don't normally say things like that. Like if they're really deep in it, they're not aware. It's everybody else's fault. It's never theirs. So,
yeah, we started going through this divorce, and I started seeing a therapist.
mhm.
Um, in a matter of 10 years, I lost my mom. My mom and grandmother died 3 days apart of each other.
Oh, wow.
That messed me up. I've had three of my friends kill themselves in the past couple of years, and among other things that just kind of stick with you. And I was talking to her one day about some stuff, and she said, for someone who like continually goes through different things, and you're still carrying this weight from you when you were a child and all this other stuff, she said, you're very self-aware, and you operate with a lot of logic. She's
Mhm.
like, you logic everything. She actually asked me one day, she's like, next, can you come at me with some emotion, because you have way too much logic for someone who like has so much.
Yeah. That's
And
almost their job, is to apply the logic. You're like doing her job for her, or their job for
right, and
her.
that's what she
Yeah.
said. She's like, I really can't even charge you for the session because you just did the therapy for yourself. She actually did. She gave me one session for free. She's like, you're helping yourself. I'm just sitting here listening.
Yeah.
I did go through psychology courses
Mhm.
when I was in eighth grade. I was taking college level psychology courses. So um, I I actually skipped third grade. I was supposed to be when I was in third grade. I should have been actually in like seventh or eighth in a lot of classes, and um, I, I I was a pretty smart kid. I don't know what happened. I got into comic books. Blame comic books. They're the devil.
Well, when do those? Well, just a couple follow-up questions. We'll get to that. But is your dad still around? Do you have any relationship with him?
Oh yeah, my dad, he kind of got out of my life when I was 12. He was a truck driver growing up, so and not like a local truck driver. He was a
Mm.
national truck driver, so he'd travel sometimes to California. I wouldn't see him for a few months. And when I was 12, he gave up driving, and then all this other stuff happened. I didn't actually see him. I saw him once between 12 and 19. And when I saw him when I was 19, I was an angry kid. I was angry at that point.
Mm,
My mom and my family had moved away when I was 17. And like I said, I moved out when I was 13. So there was a lot of built up anger. And he came out. He came to visit. I played a show. I got pretty drunk. And underage drinking isn't good, kids. But you know, I got pretty drunk and I laid into him, even though the man traveled 12 hours to come see me.
mm.
And I just hashed it out with him. And ever since then, we've been close. My dad might be my best friend, which is really, really awesome.
Well, that's
It's
great.
not your most like it's not a normal father-son relationship, but it's it's uh it's honestly the healthiest relationship I have sometimes, you know. And I called him the other day and I was pretty upset about something, and I knew it was something stupid. And I have a few people in my life that I call and I say, "Hey, I'm being stupid. I just need you to I need your words to come to me saying I'm stupid."
Yeah.
And I called him. I said, "Hey, like I'm upset about this. I know I shouldn't be. Can you just tell me I'm being stupid and move on?" And of course, my dad loves that stuff, and he just told me how big of a dumbass I was. And you know, um, he's like, "I'm being harsh on you, but you know, being easy on you isn't going to help you. You just need to get over it and move on."
Mm.
And yeah, so my dad's still around. We're very
Oh,
close.
that's cool.
He
What
works third shift, so we talk when we can talk.
oh, that's awesome. I'm glad you guys found reconnected that way. A friend of mine, he had a dad that sort of pieced when he was younger, and then when he got older, he went to go see him, and he thought basically his dad was dying, and so he went and almost like just unloaded all of his trauma, like all of his issues with what his dad had done over the years on him, like on his deathbed, essentially. And his dad pulled through, and they had a relationship for years until his dad did die. But he said like he kind of regretted that he had chosen that time to sort of unload on him because it's not the best time for everybody, to deal with those issues. But um, yeah, I
I
think
will
it's.
say, oops, sorry. I didn't
No,
mean
you
to
go
cut you.
ahead. No.
So, I talk about my daughter, and my daughter is my stepdaughter.
Mhm.
And anyone that knows us doesn't realize that she's my stepdaughter because she's literally like just like me. I've been in her
Mhm.
life since she was 2 weeks old.
Mhm.
So, and she's 14. Now, her dad was not in the picture until she was about 5. He was, we knew who he was. He was, his mom picked her up every once in a while, but, maybe saw her 3 times a year sometimes.
Mhm.
Um, Sometimes more as she got older, it was more, but he chose school over being a dad. He was a young dad, and I'm
Mhm.
not passing judgment. Um, but over the course of the 9 years that I've been in her life, she's asked me to adopt her, I think 5 times now. And we could do it. I could, figure out how to make that happen for her. She, in the state of North Carolina, she can um, request that now. But I told her that and I've said this since she, talking about when she was 7 years old. And I said, for me to adopt you would be the most selfish thing that I could do. And she said, why? I said, I'd love to just and not have to worry about somebody else.
Mhm.
You know, the every other weekend that he gets her and I see her go through these emotional roller coasters. She told me one day that she wished that she was the kid that he wanted because he praises other children, not her. Won't go into that whole traumatic story on, but she when she said that, I said it'd be really selfish because I didn't have a good relationship with my dad until I was 19.
Mhm.
And so, how do you know that when you're 19, you won't have a relationship with your dad? I said, if I adopt you, he's out of the picture. You know, she doesn't even have his last name. She has my ex-wife's maiden name.
Mhm.
And I said, when you're 18, if you want to for your birthday, we'll just take you down and change your last name if that's what you need.
Yeah,
And
I guess you're right. It is a nice gesture, but I mean, you are her dad, and I'm sure she
right,
obviously she feels that way. It's like people that have been together for 20 years but never got married. I mean, what's the difference? You still that have that connection. I guess
yeah,
you
I'm still
don't.
her dad.
Yeah, exactly.
The school calls me if there's anything going wrong. In fact, the first time he showed up to pick her up, they actually called the cops and then called me to come verify it was actually him. That was interesting situation. But, you know, to that point, you know, every like relationship you have, parental or not, they you never know when those relationships will evolve.
Mm.
You know, people, I don't think people necessarily change. I do think that we we evolve, we grow up, we who we are is inherent to us.
Mm.
Uh, and I love talking about this piece. So, you know, talking about my dad. Um, During most of my developmental years, he wasn't around. And the first time we got together, my girlfriend was with us that like a long time ago. And she had been in my life. Well, she's still in my life now. We're still good friends 25 years later. Um, but my dad and I hadn't seen each other in almost 10 years. Like I said, my developmental time, he wasn't around. There's no explanation why. She has pictures and she's like, you and your dad are clones. And I was like, why? And so she showed me pictures. She's like, you stand the same way, you hold a fork the same way, you talk the same way, you cuss at drivers the same way.
Hmm.
It's really weird. And the other day I was walking out of the store and I look at myself and I'm like, I'm dressed just like my dad used to dress. Like this is weird because I don't like shoes. I've always worn flip-flops, you
Uh,
know, in winter I'll walk around in flip-flops and jeans and a t-shirt. And I'm like, this is my dad. So I took a picture. I said, Dad, I just woke up and I realized that I'm turning into you. This isn't cool.
Yeah, I noticed that too. Me and Dad are very similar. Like we never had the same interests. Well, I think we have the same sense of humor, which has definitely come through. But even as I get older, I feel like I'm starting to look like him a little more, and also I'm starting to like, the things that he would do that annoyed me. I notice I'm doing, and I got to try to stop myself from annoying my wife or anybody else with those. So, that sort of thing. But yeah, it does. I think it comes for all of us a little bit, whether you're cognizant of it or not. I mean, you do share the DNA with them, and you did spend developmental years with them for the most part, depending on your situation. So, it's sure enough, something's going to rub off.
Yeah,
Um,
he called me, I want to say last week, and he was like, I'm just calling to say you're welcome. I'm like, what do you mean? And he was like, oh, you know, I left the doctor and I got like an awesome bill of health. And the doctor asked me, you know, what's my diet like? He's like, well, I drink 6 Monster energy drinks a day and I live off roast beef. And the doctor was like, you're 64 years old and you're like, he's super healthy. And
mhm.
that's lifestyle. You know, he works third shift. So it's roast beef sandwiches and Rockstar energy drink
Well,
and or Monster energy drink. And so he calls me. He's like, "You're welcome." He's like, "The doctor said I have really good genes." He's like, "And I gave those to you."
yeah.
I thought it was funny. I was like, "Dad, I'm at like 4 Ghost energy drinks a day. I need to catch up."
Yeah, yeah, maybe that's the problem. You're just not slamming enough energy drinks, man.
I know. I was like,
That's
"Man, I'll live forever if I just, you know, crank up the
yeah.
caffeine." They
Yes.
say that is bad for your heart, but on the contrary.
Yeah, but maybe you're some opposite. There's something in your DNA that just thrives on caffeine specifically. Well, when you mentioned you had a couple near, I want to talk about your music and near-death experience and comics and your comic. So we'll get to all those. But the what was the music like? Were you always a big music person? And what was the bands you were
Oh
in?
yeah, yeah. I have always been a huge, um, yeah, music person. I guess you would say.
Hmm.
Uh,
What do you
when
play?
I play guitar.
Hmm.
When I was little, you know, my dad got me a guitar when I was like 6. I messed around on that for a high school. I was in out of bands. My senior year, I joined a band that I stayed in until I was 20. We actually got a record offer from Universal, and that broke the whole band up because we looked at the contract and we were like, we don't want to spend the rest of this time period with these guys. You know, like we had already been a band for like 3, 4 years at that point, and there's it's a tough lifestyle being tied to 4 to 5 clashing personalities. And generally,
Hmm.
good bands always have clashing personalities because
Sure
that's what
do.
builds that, you know, it balances out the music. And I just remember reading the contract and I disappeared for a weekend. I was in Connecticut. Just went to Rhode Island and I was hanging out on the beach for a few days. And I was like, I don't see myself wanting to be in a van or a bus or a plane with these guys for any extended periods of time. We're great going to a few shows and playing the small tours we do, but I don't think I could live in a van with them. And that was kind of the general consensus from everybody, is we had our friends, and like we all would get along, but there was enough tension there to know that we would probably kill each other if given the chance on the road.
Mm-hmm.
So me and my singer quit. And I think for a couple months, we like messed around in different bands in the state. I got into a couple things. He got into a couple things. And then one day we were actually just in Rhode Island at a friend's house and talked to a couple, managers, and they said, "Hey, check out North Carolina. It's got a really good music scene." That was on a Sunday. We got into a car on a Tuesday night, showed up in North Carolina Wednesday morning, and just signed a lease on Friday. And I walked into a Denny's in Kernersville, North Carolina. I looked at a couple kids and I said, "You're wearing metal shirts. I will buy one of you dinner if you give me a place to stay." And one was like, "My parents are gone for the weekend. You can come crash at my place." And I was, "All right, I'm paying for your food." And I didn't know who he was. I didn't know anything about him. And I went to his house and I slept on his floor. And then 2 days later, I signed a lease. I drove back home for about a month. And yeah. So yeah, I moved here so I gave myself a year. I said, if we're not signed in a year, I'll just go home. That was my deal to myself, because when I moved here, I got with some of my friends in Connecticut, and I spent most of my teenage years up there, and we were having a goodbye party, and I said, "Am I doing something stupid? Like, is this dumb?" And my buddy looked at me, and I've known him since we were in fourth grade. And he's like, "Nothing's ever going to change here. So if it doesn't work out, you can just come home.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the world's not going to end just because you move."
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of like the blessing that I needed. So, and realistically, I was just back home last weekend, and not everything's the same, but I can still call my friends, and now I go to their house and hang out with them and their kids. But
Yeah.
he was right. Life stayed the same. And so I came down, like I said, gave myself a year, and we did, we were already touring. We had some interest in local labels and things. And so, we were doing well enough to just sell venues out within 6 months. So I was like, all right, we got something here. There's something. And so I signed my second year lease. And New Year's 2005, so moved here in 2004, went through 2005. We're going into 2006, and we were headlining this big show at a skate park, and we needed merch. Well, the local record label was like the hot thing at the time. All their bands were, it was that, I call it MySpace metal, that stuff.
Yeah.
That's what we fell into, and everybody was looking to get signed to them. And I knew this dude's inbox was just full of like, check out my demo.
Mm-hmm.
But I emailed him and I said, "Hey, I just need some merch for a show. I hear you guys have the best shirts." They did. They had the best price and the best turnaround for shirts. And I really liked the printer they used. And so I said, "Hey, I just need some merch." And he was like, "Cool, send me your order, send me your stuff." So we go back and forth a few times, get the designs to him. And I didn't have to pay for them up front. He's like, "Well, there's a band I want to check out at that venue anyway, so I'll bring the shirts to you." I was like, "Cool." And every time we talked, it was like he was waiting for something else.
Yeah, he's
Like,
waiting for you to ask.
me to try and pitch the band.
Yeah.
Because he knew who we were. I mean, we were selling out venues. It was, we were relatively popular. And I just never fed into it. And so he shows up at the venue, and I go and I hand him the cash. I was like, "Cool, thanks. We need these for the table." And I just shake his hand, give him the money, and I turn around and I walk away, and I'm setting the merch table up. And he's like, so you're not even gonna ask if I'm gonna stay and watch you guys? And I was like, oh, are you? Like, we're headlining, like you get in for free because you own the biggest record label in the state. And he was like, yeah, I was gonna stick around, like, but everybody asked me to check their band out. He even asked me once if I wanted to like check you out. And I looked at him and I was like, if you want to watch us, then watch us, but I'm not going to ask you to, because at this point, you either know who we are or we don't, and I don't want to be just another person asking you to check us out. And I said, but you're more than welcome. If I need to pay for your ticket, let me know. Like, appreciate you hanging out.
Yeah.
I just walked away. I had other things to do. I was like, cool, just let me know. And if I see you, cool. Hope you like the show. And so he stayed for the whole show. Afterward, he was like, I'm still confused. You're the first band that hasn't asked me to sign you. And but you just want t-shirts. And I said, well, if all I can get are t-shirts, then I'm happy, because we can do this all day long. Like I can
Yeah.
band. I have enough contacts, through my previous years. And he just kind of laughed and he's like, well, would you guys be interested in joining the label? And I said, well, if you're going to offer, then of course. So, it took us about a year and a half, but we got signed. And then shortly after we signed with him, Sony Red came in and bought the label for distribution and everything. So, you know, yeah, by proxy, we were signed to Sony. It was nice. And we could tout that when we walked around. It's like, yeah, we're on Sony Red, which is like their subsidiary label.
Cool.
And so we did Warp Tour, we did a couple full US tours, did a lot of stuff. We still get like a couple thousand plays on Spotify every month, which is cool.
What's the band name? I don't know if you
My
mentioned.
Hero Is Me.
Okay.
Like
That's
I said,
awesome.
it's that emo screamo stuff from the early 2000s.
Oh,
So
that's all right. Hey, I'm a 38, almost 39-year-old person. That's right up my alley. So
oh, okay, cool.
yeah, that's good. That's what I listened to growing up for sure. I'm definitely gonna look that up. That's awesome. So you said you went back to school and
Yeah.
and what
Well,
did,
we did that for a few years, and then we were actually on tour, and my grandmother was actually, when my mom and everybody moved to Maine, um, I moved in and took care of my grandmother. She had had a stroke and a heart attack, and she couldn't drive herself. She could do everything else but drive. And so I moved in, helped take care of her. She was deaf in one ear, and um, she just needed some, pick her up and take her to the grocery store, or, listen to make sure no one broke into the house, those kind of things.
Mhm.
And so I lived with her for a few years. And, even growing up, she's the one that taught me how to throw a temper tantrum. She was arguably more of a prominent figure in my life than my mother. And when she passed away, that took a toll on me. We had been on tour, and I looked at everything we were doing. We were doing well, but I was like, I wake up drunk every morning. I go to bed drunk every night. I'm partying every day. And some people would say that's really cool, but I was like, what else is there? I'm hanging out with the same group of guys I was hanging out with 5 years ago. My life hasn't moved. I'm more successful in the area that I want to be in, but like, what is my life? What am I doing here? Um, and I wasn't like knocking the lifestyle, but there just comes a point where you're like, is this it?
Hmm.
And I knew there was a shelf life to the style of music. Um, I knew, and I was in a similar situation that I was in before. I just really hated some of the guys I was in the band with. It became like a business deal.
Hmm. That's
And
what they all become. Yeah,
right.
I don't think any of the Rolling Stones are hanging out together in their off time, so
But I tell people it's like having four girlfriends at once.
yeah, oh yeah.
It's
That you're with
it sounds really
24/7.
cool until you do it.
Yeah.
It's terrible. It's more drama than you ever want to deal with. Uh,
Mhm.
and there was no, like, I don't regret any of it. I had a lot of fun. It
Mhm.
just came to a point where I was like, what else can I do in life? And so I showed up. We had been in the middle of a tour. We were writing another album, and I had kind of locked myself away and wrote most of the music. And um, we were in the process of getting all the stuff recorded, and I said, well, hey, the label's gonna give us X amount of money to finish this album out. And they were like, oh, well, there's this spot in Raleigh we want to go to. And I said, well, for us to go to Raleigh from where we're at, we have to get room and we have to pay for the rooms to stay there. It's a 2 hour drive that we're not going to want to make every day. And I did the math and I'm like, well, we're going to spend about, $3,000 just on the practice space and living cost for the time. I said, we're going to eat up all our funds doing that. I said, we can take that money, stay where we're at, get a small practice space for $180 a month and use the rest of that money to, funnel into ourselves, our equipment, put some money aside for when we're on the road because yeah, the per diems are great, but I'm approaching it from a logical business stance of like, hey, we can still drive to Raleigh and party. We don't have to stay in Raleigh and party.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, and they literally, their response to me was, well, we already have a bunch of parties set up, so we just want to go there. And at that point we were kind of dispersing for a weekend. I went to my girlfriend's house and just kind of like sat. Now my girlfriend owned, like her family owned the entire street they lived on and they had like 30 acres of land.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just on this huge farm, like looking up at the sky, like what am I going to do? And so I showed up at the venue we were about to play. We had a couple like home shows that we were playing and I said, yep, this is my last one. And it just so happened it was the same place we signed our contract. So, yeah, I just decided it was time to do something else. And so that was like July, August. And I said I was giving myself a few months to, recalibrate and then go back to school and go from there. I actually flew up to Connecticut. A buddy of mine paid me like $10,000 to build a patio for his house. I had no idea. So it took me like 2 weeks to figure out how to build a patio. And then I built the patio for him and we had like running water going through. It was beautiful. Don't ask me how I did it. It was all books and YouTube, but
Nice.
got it done. And so he paid me to go up there and he's like, you're starting over. This will help you out. And he's a pretty well-off guy.
Mm.
So he was like, the money's nothing to me. He's like, you're helping me out. We were building the patio for his mom. And he's like, I'll help you out. And then, just do something with your life. So came back and like I said, went back to school, worked 2 and 3 jobs for quite a while and then started a family. And then I just got really big into Dungeons and Dragons. And that's when I started the comic book.
So are you reading comics all this time as a kid too, like all the way through?
I read comics as a kid, yes.
Mm-hmm.
My first comic was Ninja Turtles.
Oh,
I think I was like 5, 6 years old. I still have it. And then I got into, same thing as every other kid at that time, X-Men, then Spider-Man and Batman. And then that led to Image Comics. And, as a teenage boy, you can't go wrong with lots of big muscles, guns, and women. So got into all that stuff for a while. And then the last real run that I read start to finish was Age of Apocalypse. Then that's when my life just kind of like veered. And, the starving artist thing is a real thing. You can't really buy comics when you're on the road. And I would pick up things here and there. And I got really lost in all the storylines, to be honest with you. And right around 2012, 2013, I tried to pick up the New 52. And some of it was okay. A lot of it, I was like, what are they doing here? And then I picked up Marvel and I felt the same way. I felt very like lost in comics. So I just started reading old comics.
You need to make it like a full-time job just to stay on top of continuity if you're trying to. And it's insane. I generally, yeah, old stuff's easier to follow. You follow creative stuff or like creators' works or what they've done here in these areas. Like I've started rereading Peter David's Spider-Man 2099 book, so I'm reading that now. So that's fun. Like from the start,
2099 was a solid.
When it first came around, it was solid. Yeah, it was cool. I mean, I remember the X-Men wasn't as strong, but the Doom one turned out to be really cool, and the Spider-Man one was really fun. And yeah, they even had a little nod to the Deadpool version in the movie. So all that stuff's pretty cool. But yeah, so Okay, so then getting into D&D and turning that into a comic. But your comic's not like a fantasy. It looks more like a sci-fi thing. Is it a
It's a superhero. It's an ad, adventure story with superheroes.
okay, so
So it has like the aesthetic of a superhero comic,
mhm,
the story of like an adventure, like a D&D adventure.
mhm,
Um, when I lived in Boone for a long time, Boone, North Carolina,
mhm,
and I met just a bunch of people. Work just sent me there. So I was a district manager for GameStop, and some of my employees played, and some of the people in some of like the local area of Boone played. And every time I was in this one store, they kept bugging me to play. And I said, guys, I'm a nerd. I'm not that big of a nerd, not doing it. And they coaxed me into it by homebrewing a Mass Effect campaign. And I love Mass Effect. So I said, fine, I'll check it out. And for 2 years, every Sunday, I got together with them and played Mass Effect D&D. And in that time period, we talked about doing like some superhero stuff. And it was just really hard to balance a superhero campaign because you want to be super. And just in like 2018, we hadn't played together in almost 10 years at that point. Um, I was like, wait a minute, all these D&D characters would be super if you just took all the other characters and made them human. Like your cleric or your warlock is super because they use magic. They're
mhm,
not super when everybody in the entire world uses magic.
mhm.
And so I don't know how such a simple concept hit me. I said, "Hey guys, let's homebrew some classes and let's just make everybody else normal and we'll play modern day. You guys are yourselves. That way, role playing is easy. It's just you with these abilities in this situation." And we just had fun. So much fun that I didn't even know. Actually, when we started the comic, I had no idea how to draw comic books. I could doodle, some dumb stuff here and there, but I was not an artist, to say the least. Um, I 3 months just drawing an issue zero that never got released because it was abysmal and terrible. And I gave it away as like a stretch goal once on a Kickstarter just to show everybody where everything started.
Mhm.
Uh, but it was just supposed to be for us. And like I said, I spent 3 months on it and I was pretty happy with it. I thought it was like God's gift to comic books. I was like, oh my God, this thing's amazing. I drew this. I can't believe this happened. And I went to my friends and they were like, that's cool. It's fun. None of them are really into comic books. And they appreciated the gesture of turning their session into a comic.
Mhm.
And then I showed my wife at the time, and my ex is a phenomenal artist. And like she's a photographer by trade and an artist on the side, and she's very good with lighting, human anatomy, all that fun stuff. And so she looked through the comic book. We're watching TV together. And mind you, at this point, we've been in each other's lives for about 15 years.
Mhm.
And so she scrolls through and she hands it back to me without even making eye contact, turns the TV on, and she goes, "It's okay." And I guess she didn't know what it meant to me, but I was like,
Oh God.
wow. And so the next day I went and I got an iPad and all the Procreate and all the tools. And I started sketching and I said, well, let's make me better. If I'm just okay, now I want to do it. So I spent another few months working on what became issue one, and everything I drew, she erased or sketched over or crossed out. It was quite the trip. I put all my ego aside. She knows more than me.
Mhm.
She's an actual artist. Her mother is an art teacher. Everyone in her family is somehow doing art for a living.
Mhm.
And I said, okay, I'm going to listen to what she says. People pay her to make paintings. I'm not going to go against someone who knows the anatomy portion of it, especially. And so for the first four books, every page she ripped apart and then I would fix and come back. And, but, end of issue one, when I was done, I realized I couldn't color it because I spent so much time learning how to draw. I didn't know how to color. And I tried and I was like, wow, I'm terrible at coloring. So I tried to get a few people I knew that could color digitally, and everything kept falling out because it was like the start of 2020 at this point.
Mhm.
And people had kids and stress and all this other stuff. So finally, I found a girl that would color it, and she wanted about $500 to do everything. I didn't have $500, so a buddy of mine was like, just go to Kickstarter. Literally the whole Wayne's World, like if you build it, they will come.
Mhm.
Had no idea what I was doing, no social media. Like this again was just supposed to be something for my friends, and wound up raising, about $700 on Kickstarter with no promotion, no say it's a D&D comic book about these idiot friends of mine.
Mhm.
And I didn't know what I was doing. I actually put $1,500 as the goal because I didn't know how much Kickstarter would cost. I didn't know shipping. I didn't know anything else. I just saw that, hey, most comic books fund at 15. So I did 1,500. And I didn't need it, but that's what I thought you had to do. And so needless to say, we didn't fund. I didn't get the money, and then I was bummed. And I was on Facebook, and a buddy of mine who owns quite a few marijuana fields
Mhm.
was just talking to me. And we used to work together. Him and I were really good friends. I used to live on his couch. And he goes, what is this comic book thing you're doing? What's this Kickstarter? Go through the whole thing with him. And he's like, you just need $500. And I said, yeah, that'll pay her, and I should have like the extra $100 or so to get them printed.
Mhm.
And so he just sends me the money on Facebook. Like apparently you can just send money to people on Facebook. I didn't even know that was a thing. I just get a message, Steve just sent you money. And I was like, what? And he goes, hey, I'm literally sitting on a private jet right now. He's like, I got into this stuff real early. Everything you do, you put your all into. He's like, go have fun. And he's like, I have two Lamborghinis and a jet. Like, I have the money to give you a couple $100.
Yeah, this is pocket change for me.
Right. And I'm not bragging on him, but dude did very
Yeah,
well.
absolutely. Yeah, it's nice that he used his wealth to help someone out and support, right?
Right. I
Yeah.
was blessed. So I messaged everybody on Kickstarter and said, hey, you're getting a free book. So I finished the book, printed it, shipped it to everybody that was on Kickstarter. And then I made a website real quick and put it up for order. And I sold 100 copies on the website. And I thought I was done. I was like, cool, I've done it, move on. And within a month, people were like, so when's issue 2 coming out? And I was like, I hadn't thought about that.
Just
And then,
1 minute while you furiously run into the other room and start drawing, writing
yeah.
issue 2.
Well, I mean, it wrote itself because everything's recorded. I just storyboard based off of the recordings.
Mm.
And so,
That's a cool way to do it. I don't think I've talked to anybody that does their stories in that manner, obviously. It's funny you mentioned that because I remember when I was a kid, I very briefly, I didn't play much D&D or anything like that, but I very briefly played Heroes Unlimited, which was a, similar RPG style superhero game. I think it's long since gone now, but it was one that I definitely connected with. So when I read the kind of shtick for yours, based on real life campaigns, I thought it's a really cool and novel way to do it. I was a huge fan growing up of the Dragonlance books. And that was all from their D&D campaign, right? Like the people that wrote the
yes,
books. So
my brother got me into Dragonlance.
I read like 100 of those books when I was a teenager. Like I read them in like 2 days. I just like breeze through them. I love them so much. And there's so many.
What's fun is you get an organic story.
Mm,
It's not something that I sat there and I wrote and then I edited and then I came back and I had somebody else look at it. It's just, hey, you're in this situation. What do you do? And so my role as the dungeon master is to really, I curate the world and the story, but they really write the actions, the dialogue, and the flow because, really the world does revolve around them. That's how D&D is.
and it feels more like lived in because each of the characters are like based on real, like they are the real people. So you're getting real life voices of 5 or 6 different people,
Yes.
instead of just one voice trying to change it to, beat and match the characters that they've created. So it's
Yeah,
a really cool idea. It's a really neat way to do it. It's almost just like having a writer's room, but for comics, where everybody sort of has a character. It's really cool. I really dig it, the concept.
thank you. I didn't know what I was doing in the beginning, and I actually didn't even think of myself as like a comic book creator until about a year and a half ago. We've done 8 issues now, and I did like 4 in the first 2 years. And somebody was like, "Oh, so you're a comic book creator now?" And I was like, "I guess I am. Yeah,
Hmm.
I create comic books because I draw them and I do somewhat write them." And I was like, "This is weird." It's like it's just a moment. I'm like, I just kind of draw what my friends do. And someone was like, "No, you're a comic book creator now." And I'm like, "Okay, cool. Add that to my resume. I create comic books. This is
Yeah.
fun."
Hey, the end result's the same, no matter how you get there, right?
Yeah, well, growing up with Stanley, Jack Kirby, Rob Liefeld, Tom McFarlane, like all those the big names,
Hmm.
and you hear their stories about how they came up with characters and these stories they wrote and all these other things. And I'm like, I don't do any of that. I just record my friends as I try to kill them. And it's what I when I look back at everything, and I like to reread stuff. Um, I'm my harshest critic, but I actually enjoy reading our story. I went through the other day and I was like, would I change anything? Well, for one, I really don't want to because it's all recorded and I want to keep that organic feel. I don't really like editing the story because it takes away from the core of what it is.
Hmm.
But I still enjoy it, which is the funny part. I go through, I'm like, I've played the game, I've talked about everything that's in here, then I drew it, and I had to read it 4 times when we were going through editing, and yet I can still pick the thing up a year or two later and read it and enjoy it. I said, okay, so I'm doing something right because I can't even listen to my own music without going, man, I can play that better.
Hmm.
I don't draw my own tattoos because if I draw them now, I know in 2 years I'll draw them better.
Hmm.
And looking back at a story from 2 years ago, yeah, I can look at some of the art and say I could redraw it and do a better job, because like I said, I taught myself how to draw just to do this comic, but the story carries it. And I think that's the fun part for me is knowing that um, the story carries the art. And now I'm at a point where people are asking me to do art. Like I've done 4 covers this year. Like people, hey, can you draw a cover for me? I'm like, I'm not a cover artist. I'm barely a comic book artist. They're like, no, I really like your art. Can you? So now I'm a cover art. Like, it just like kind of like opens up all these doors. And I was just like, I just want to draw my D&D comic book, you
That's
know?
awesome. That's
Um,
huge. Oh man, that's so cool. Wow. So you just had a Kickstarter for the newest issue of Crit?
Yeah, I actually just before we got on here, I put it up for pre-order on our website because the Kickstarter ended, and so now if anybody wants to pre-order, they can just go to the website and do that.
Awesome. And the Kickstarter
But
was successful?
we did 77 backers, which is it's a little lower than normal, but I think Kickstarter as a whole is down, so I'm not going to complain. We funded in 12 hours, so and most of my stuff comes from the website or cons. We do quite a bit between both of those, which is it's kind of cool. You don't hear a lot of people that say they do a lot of shipping off their website. So
Yeah,
um,
that's huge.
this
I've
this
certainly
year,
grown to appreciate how much people are like this DIY world of comics that we got now. Because I've talked to a lot of folks like yourself that are out there doing it. And you're basically running a marketing firm on top of having a comic book company because you got to market yourself. That's the whole part of it. So,
glad my degree is in marketing.
oh, perfect. Yeah, I'm a graphic designer, so it's kind of my world too.
Yeah, so
Uh,
I minored in visual communication, and my major was just communication. So and that's all just marketing. Most of my classes were visual marketing, digital marketing. Uh, when I was in school, they also had, a whole class on telephones and telephone marketing and how that works. And that's how long ago I went to school.
yeah. Well, yeah, mine was similar in that it was mostly all graphic design, but obviously I had an eye on turning it into comics, which I did a little bit, but I'd like to get back to soon. So
I want to
um,
get into web development.
I do that now too. That's part of as a graphic designer, I do like websites, social media, and just all the design stuff too. So uh,
I wanted to do that, and then like design for like marketing design because
Hmm.
when I was in school, it was a big field, and a lot of people weren't really good at it. And I was, I've been blessed with an eye for that kind of stuff. Now, drawing, I'm not where I want to be. I have a lot of people that tell me my art's great and I really appreciate it. And, um, I'm always my harshest critic there. But I've always felt that when with graphic design, because I took it in high school too, it was just something that I clicked with. Um, oh, this is off like a centimeter, and you don't even know. Like, I could just go, oh, yeah, it's probably off about a centimeter, and then you measure it, and it's like, oh, it really is. Oh, wow. Like that's where my eye goes.
Hmm.
Um, even, my ex-wife, she's actually her job is marketing,
Hmm.
and she'll call me and say, hey, can you help me with this? I'm just not seeing it. And she's phenomenal with all the art side of it, but when it comes to putting it all together, she's like, "Can you help me? Because I'm at a loss here. I just go in. I'm like, yeah, just do all this and move this over here, twist this way. It's good." And she's like, "I've been at this for 4 hours, and you've been at it for 4 minutes." So I'm like, "Cool, just still help me with my comic books, and we're good."
Yeah, that's awesome. No, it's well, that's it, right? I mean, people sometimes because I can get stuff done usually fairly quickly, and sometimes I can do a pretty elaborate design, and then someone will be like, "Well, that was fast," and I'd be like, "Yeah, well, you do it for so long. I've been doing it for 20 years. It's like that. Eventually, the you have enough experience that you know what works and what doesn't. You don't spend a lot of time spitballing anymore. You go right to the what works." Very cool. Well, anything coming up? You want to any appearances at conventions or just check out the website and check out the pre-order?
Well, yeah, I mean, I do have a couple conventions. I've got Atlantic Comic Con, the Atlantic Con. I think it's their first year.
Hmm.
I'm doing that. Yeah, that's at Virginia Beach. I'll be at New York Comic Con. I'm not. I don't have a table. I'm actually working. So a friend of mine does Heroes and Villains. He works for them.
Oh, cool.
He builds a team, and he's like, "Hey, why don't you come work New York Comic Con with me and just bring a backpack, and you can walk around, pass out your comics, and at the same time, get paid to be at New York Comic Con." I was like, "Of course, count me
Yeah.
in." So I'll be there, and I'll probably update what booth I'm at. That way, if anybody does want to come by, I will have comic books with me there. And then I'll be at NC Con in Raleigh or Durham, North Carolina. That's in November. In October, I've got South Carolina Junior. So they do South Carolina does a Comic Con, and then they do a junior version of it. So it's just a 1 day Comic Con at the end of the year. So I'll be there
Nice.
as well.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, I think I've done like 7 cons this year. It's like my busiest con year.
Yeah.
And uh, we did Heroes Con. Yeah, and I've been doing Heroes Con now for 3 or 4 years. And I had 3 people that came up that to the con just to get something from me. And I was like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's a great feeling, when you
So,
got your people, like you said, if you build
right,
it, they'll
right.
come, right? So
Yeah, I mean, it's taken a few years, but people are, now they're spending $70 on a ticket just to come by and buy a $5 book.
that's
So that book has to
fantastic.
be good. I do put a lot of time and effort into these things. I promise. It's worth the $70 for admission.
Well, the comics look super fun. I'm looking forward to checking some out. And yeah, just thanks a lot for being in the show, Chris. This is a blast.
Well, this was great. Thanks for recalibrating all the schedule for me.
Oh, hey, no problem. I'm happy to chat comics and nerddom with people all day, all night. So
Cool. Well, if you have another spot sometime, let me know.
yeah,
I live in front of the computer, so I'm always here.
awesome. Next time you got something new coming out, drop me a line and we can get a little blurb on it for you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Awesome. No, thank you, Chris.
I'll talk to you later.
Bye bye. And there it is, my conversation with Chris Michael. A great chat, a great talk. Like I said, we get into some deep stuff, and yeah, that's one thing I love. Well, there's many things I love about doing this show, but one of them is when you get to really have an in-depth conversation with someone about their life. I mean, some people, like I said, are way more open than others. Chris was wide open, and that makes for an even better conversation. It just flows better, and you get into it. And yeah, I've always said I kind of want this show to feel like when you're listening to 2 people get to know each other at a party. And that's kind of the vibe I go for. So hopefully, that's what you're getting as well. I'm hope so. If you're listening, I'm guessing and you're into it. So keep listening and like, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your neighbor, tell the mailman, tell whoever you're chatting to go listen. Get the word out there, spread it wide, because I would love to make this a full-time job someday. Not quite there, but I'm working on it. We're getting there, and thanks to people like you, fans, listeners out there, we are working towards that goal. So once again, I much appreciate you tuning in, and be sure to tune in next time. The Graphic Histories Podcast is a proud partner of the United Federation of Podcasts.